If you need to leave the US immediately and you haven't planned for it, what are some options? In this video, we'll cover that. We'll also cover options if you have a week or two to plan. So these are locations that I call emergency locations. And there's so many places in the world to go. Choosing something can be difficult. However, knowing where you can get a visa and where you might be able to park yourself could be helpful. That'll give you time to figure out what you're going to do. So let's take a look at some emergency destination locations. We've broken them down into three tiers. The first tier are countries where you could get a stop for 180 days without a visa or an advance visa. The second are countries where you can get visas for 90 days and it's relatively easy to renew it for another 90 days. The third includes some other countries that may be 90 days but may require electronic visas, etc., but they're potential possibilities that you could look into. The first of these is the United Kingdom, which requires an electronic visa. Apply online, and if you're approved, you can go ahead and get that flight. If you're not, move on to the rest of the list. Peru has a no visa approach, Mexico a visa upon arrival, Panama has a no visa approach. For Canada, when you arrive at the Canadian Immigration Office, the officer determines whether you get the 6 months. For Georgia, and that's not the Georgia in the US, that's the Georgia in Europe, there's no visa and they allow you to stay for a whole year. Now, all these visas are for tourism. So keep that in mind and don't risk that visa if you're going there that way. So let's take a look at countries that have 90-day visas. And these are 90-day visas with relatively easy extensions for another 90 days. These include Colombia, and Colombia has no visa requirement to get in. You can arrive there and get your 90 days. Brazil has an e-visa. You need to start that online. So if you're in a rush, like leaving today, maybe that's not an option. Uh, Ecuador, Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay all have no visas, and they allow you to stay for 90 days, and you can easily expand that. Note that there are other countries with a 90-day visa, many others, where you can get in as a US citizen. However, extension might be somewhat challenging. So let's look at some other options. This includes Europe. Europe has the Schengen area, and you can arrive at the Schengen area right now and have 90 days. I understand that they're putting in an electronic visa in 2026 sometime. Then you have Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Malaysia, Morocco, Tunisia, and South Africa. All of them are essentially visa-free and good for about 90 days. But some are shorter and some are longer. So you might want to go to that website and check what those visas allow. And then if you're into the Oceania, which is Australia and New Zealand, they have an electronic visa system. So you may need more than a day. If you're planning on leaving today, it might not work. So most have no work element included. So if you get these visas and you move there, you need to stay there as a tourist while you figure out your next move. So let's look at Europe in a little more detail. So in Europe, or the Schengen area, this is a popular destination for many people. There's a 180-day window, is the window they measure, and within a 180-day period, you can be there for 90 days. Now, some people have tried to say, I'll take the first 180 and the second 180. I'll make it 3 months in the first 180 and 3 months in the second 180 and conjoin them so that you have a 6 month window. It doesn't work like that. You can only be there 90 days in any 180-day period. And so that makes it a little more nuanced if you're thinking about it. Also, remember that once you get that 90-day visa, it's difficult to renew it and extend it to another 90 days unless you're in the process of applying for another visa, a residence visa or a student visa or some other form of visa. So that's an option you could consider. So what's the approach in deciding where to go? Well, for some people, it's the social pull, friends and family. For others, it's the job pull. And some might say it's personal experience, places they've visited, they've traveled to that they love, and they want to move to. And then, of course, if you don't have any of these, you begin with cold research. Now, we've traveled to many countries in our search over the last few years, and we've combined that with research to come up with a short list. So, this personal experience, if your travels take you somewhere, is something that might have an influence on what you want to do. Now, remember that your choice, the country you pick or the destination you pick, should have a visa that fits your criteria. As you pick a destination, remember that visa availability is a factor you really need to consider. So, what does it take to get a visa? And before we dive into this, let me just say that sometimes people look at where can I get a visa to build the first shortlist, and then they look at the metrics associated with those locations to decide where they go. Other times, they look at the metrics and decide where they want to go and see how they can get a visa. And both are valid approaches. We're going to begin here looking at the visa availability first. So many countries will give you a visa of residency or even citizenship if you can show ancestry or descent back to that country. So that's one option. If that doesn't work for you, employment's another option. If a country is willing to give you a visa to work there because someone wants to hire you, then that's an easy way to get there. Next is skills. If you have a skill set that's unique and a country needs, they may give you a visa for that. You can always go over as a student. You might say, I want a student visa. That's a possibility, so you can check whether that's available. The next two, income and assets, are kind of blended together. Some countries say if you can show passive income of a certain amount, they'll give you some kind of a residency visa. And this can range from something in the $900 range to thousands of dollars a month. The assets are where you might be able to invest in a country. Say Europe used to have, or parts of Europe used to have a golden visa, where if you invested 500,000 euros in the country, you'd get some kind of a residency permit. So these are channels to look at when you're ready to get over there. Now, once you've got that list, or if you're going to start here, you want to select a country, here are some of the things to consider to see whether or not they fit your needs. Let's take a look at them. Safety, and that's crime and political, employment, healthcare, climate, culture, infrastructure, taxation, education, geography, and language. So building a priority around this is important. To make a short list of this and say, for the countries I can go in, what are the most important things? Or you can begin here and say, what are the most important things for me? Let's look at the countries that are best in certain areas, and then let's see about the visa. So as you look at this and you narrowed it down to some countries, and some of those countries you look at and say, I can't get a visa here based on what I'm seeing. If you're really passionate about some country that you want to go to, and you've looked at both the factors here, and you've looked at the visa requirements, and you think, great, these factors meet my needs, but I don't see a visa that fits me, you don't have to give up. You can reach out to an immigration attorney in that country who helps Americans move in there. And often they can give you much more detail and find any nuanced options that might get you into the country. So just because the visa is not available at first blush doesn't mean that there isn't a visa. Talk to an expert. For the rest of us who are not locked into a specific country or location, we use these factors and perhaps some others that you've identified to figure out where you want to go. Now, remember, the data is helpful, but the data doesn't make the decision. The decision is going to come back to what you like and want to do. So you might have two countries that are really close, and they both might be incredibly close in all metrics. Perhaps one's a little better, but you love the one that has a slightly lower metric. You're going to go to that location. So keep in mind the numbers don't drive you. Your decision is about what you love. So now the question is, how do you get the data? Finding the data can be quite complex. So before we move into this, let me throw one more thing out. If you're going to make that plunge and take that move, the most common complaint from expats or people who move into another country is the bureaucracy. And that's true whether Americans are moving overseas or others are moving to America. We all see something different to what we're accustomed to. In my experience, having lived in several countries, it's not bad, it's just different. If you set your mind to understand that, it'll make for a much smoother experience when you arrive at your destination. So let's move on to gathering and understanding the data. So, how and what data do we want to find? Well, to begin with visas. Again, we're starting the way I want to do it. You could start with the factors first. So beginning with visas, the first thing I'd recommend you do is do a search using search engines to see what are the visa opportunities for the countries you've selected or you'd like to consider. Keep in mind that search engines are marketing engines, and so they don't always give you excellent information, but they're a good place to begin. So once you've gone to the search engines, you've got your first cut of guidelines on what visas are available in each country. And based on that, you think, gee, I'm going to look at these three countries. I'd recommend that you go to the country's consulate website. So go to the country's embassy's website and look to see what visas are being listed there. Once you've got your short list, we'd recommend you go to the country's embassy website and confirm that the visas that you found in the search engine are valid and that there are no other visas that the search engines did not share with you. So now that you've got some clarity on what the visa options really are, then it becomes time to look at what the next steps are. And as I said earlier, if a path doesn't seem self-evident when you look at this at the embassy site, and you really want to go somewhere, reach out to an immigration attorney in that country. If they work with US citizens, they'll speak English, and a short conversation will give you more clarity on what your potential is to get there. Next, looking at other data, that's where we look at things like healthcare, education, safety, and various other factors. Remember that search engines are marketing engines and they're often one-dimensional. What we would suggest you do is maybe look at some kind of a AI engine like ChatGPT. There are a number of options out there. I'm going to say ChatGPT. It's not recommending that. I've used it, but there are a number of alternatives. Now, ChatGPT has a free tier where you can go in and figure out how to use it, and you do need to learn how to use it. It's not like a Google search, it's a little more in depth. So, what we can do for that is let's say you want to know the weather in France. If you ask a search engine for the weather in France, it may give you an answer. It'll be an average answer. Or if it's really helpful, it might say the weather in Toulouse is this, the weather in Paris is this, the weather in Marseille is this. That's still not quite what you need. The weather right now is not the answer you're looking for. You're looking for the range of weather over time. So for that, an AI engine like ChatGPT is really helpful. You could ask it, what is the weather in Marseille? Or you could say, compare the weather between Paris and Marseille and show me the high and low temperatures for the year. And it'll give you a table with the data. So how you ask the question is important. And you've got to remember that you need to target it to a city level to make it helpful. One of the things you can do is ask ChatGPT questions like, what data sources are there that report the weather in France? And then you could say, using those data sources, what's the difference between the weather in Paris and Marseille? That gives you very detailed answers. Keep in mind, an answer for France is not helpful because France extends from the north at the North Sea down to the south in the Mediterranean. So it's a wide range. Similarly, when you're looking at healthcare data, you could ask it, what sources are there for healthcare data? Let me look at my notes. When I did this, it gave me an answer that said, consider the World Health Organization, the Commonwealth Fund, the Bloomberg Health Efficiency Index, Legation Prosperity Index, and the OECD Health Statistics. When I ran this query and asked it, where does the US rank on the global index from these data sources? Here's some of the data it gave me. It said the US ranks 11 out of 11 on the Commonwealth funds. The Bloomberg Index places the US at 55 globally and worst among developed nations. The World Health Organization ranked us 37 out of 191 countries. That's a lot of data. It doesn't end up in one space in every ranking, but it gives you some idea where we fall. And so you can say, my destination is better or worse or comparable to what we have in the US. Now consider political stability. The ideal data index for that is the World Bank's Political Stability and Absence of Violence/Terrorism Index. And on this table, the US is in the 47.4th percentile, and that places it below many developed countries. And interpreting the data does require some math. Now let's talk about crime statistics. Often crime statistics at the national level. For example, the 2024 Nomeo Crime Index places the US 56th out of 146 countries. Well, is that a fair comparison if you're thinking of moving to a town, let's say in the middle of the country, Atlanta? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Is it equally applicable if you're moving to Chicago or to New York or LA or Wichita or Sioux Falls or some small towns? Clearly, that distribution data is not helpful on an average level. Some data sources will give you data at the city level. Some will give it to you at the town level, but you may not get all the data you want. So you may want to dig into this. It's a complex challenge, and you can see where this is going. It'll take time. If you've got a week, that'll be great. If you spend all your time to get enough data to get comfort that your country falls in a zone that you're comfortable. If you have more time, it's more reasonable to do the analysis. So if you have the time to begin the research, we'd recommend you start with the free ChatGPT version, get familiar with prompts, how to ask questions, what kind of data it can present. And then once you're comfortable with that, we'd suggest you get a paid version, the basic paid version for a month or two to drill down into the detail. That paid version has a reasoning engine. You can even say things like, I prefer climates ranging from this to this. I prefer to be at sea level or at high altitude. I am politically conservative or liberal, and what countries might be a good fit for me. And the AI engine at that reasoning level will throw some names out. Now remember, all AI engines do hallucinate to some degree. So once it's thrown a result out, you might ask specific questions about why did such and such a country fit my profile? And as you dig into this, you'll get closer and closer to more meaningful and perhaps more reliable data. So using an AI engine is a really good thing, I think, to validate your search criteria and the numbers you've come up with. So now let's take a look at some data sources. I've included some data sources here that talk to crime, political stability, healthcare, education, and cost of living. Now, this is not intended to be comprehensive. Now, each of these elements has numerous databases, and we'd recommend you come back and do that for multiple databases. So begin with saying, what databases can I get crime data at? What databases can I get political stability at? Or what sources can I get health and healthcare rankings? What sources can I get education rankings, etc.? So in upcoming videos, we'll be walking through our detailed dive on 6 countries that we kind of shortlisted. And these were France, Greece, Portugal, Spain, Brazil, and Uruguay. And of these, the outlier is Brazil from a climate perspective, as many people perceive that as a Caribbean type climate. But Brazil's long and it's huge. The northern tip's Caribbean, the southern tip abuts Uruguay. We wanted to take a look at it and see what that range of climates looked like. Now, for us, we like a more temperate climate, and we wanted to see whether somewhere in Brazil there were temperate climates. Now, that would be coastal communities and also in the hilly mountain regions to see what the options are. And we picked it because Brazil has a relatively straightforward process to get residency if that ended up being the destination. And from this, we narrowed it down to a final 2, and we'll be visiting a couple of those in a few months for our 4th or 5th visit to get comfortable that this really is the place we want to live. Now, in earlier videos, we covered many of the other countries we visited in our exploration. We didn't present them in this context. We just shared the videos of the countries that we visited. So there were countries that we loved that didn't make it to the shortlist. For example, we loved Malaysia. Malaysia is a great place, we thought, on so many levels. And really, it would be a great place to retire. However, it was just so far away that the extended family are unlikely to visit on a repeated basis. And we ruled it out solely because of accessibility, just a long way from where our kids are. So, if accessibility is a factor for you, consider that. Some people have said they've picked places for easy access so family can visit, and others said they picked places that are difficult to access because they really didn't want anybody to visit. So every issue has 2 sides, and depending on your preference, you need to choose what's a good fit for you. So in the upcoming videos, we'll compare the 6 countries and show you how we did it. I hope this video was helpful to you as you look at an emergency exit option and a planned exit option. And if so, please click the like button and share your comments. Thank you so much for watching.